Hi everyone, we're going to be going over frequency separation and the use of the Nik tools by Google. First of all, we're going to look at one of these pictures that I did on a jewellery shoot for Jewellery Shores. Now this particular shot here is a great shot. She's got very great intensity in her eyes, it's a nice pose, but one of the things that frustrated me about it when I shot it was that it's got a slight green cast to it because we were shooting in natural foliage. The foliage tends to cast a bit of green light onto your subject. So before we get going, the first thing I want to do is tackle that. So we're going to go to Nik Collection, Color Fix Pro. Now, the Nik collection is really great. It is a little slow though. Okay, so first of all, it's got Tonal Contrast loaded up, which has instantly given me my picture a bit of oomph. And we're going to add another filter onto that, and we're going to look at the white neutralizer, which is down here. Now, as it so happens, I've got this loaded up before, so you can see now, if I tone it down again, you can see that the way that the initial image is a little green, and then as we bring the bar up a bit, it makes her skin tones much more warm, and she pops even more from the background. So for the moment I'm going to leave the tonal contrast off, and we're going to come back to that later, but I just want to start with the color adjustment filter. Great, okay. So we're going to use that as our base layer. So this is our master. Now, first of all, we're going to start with frequency separation. So we're going to create our color layer. Now, if you don't know about frequency separation, it is essentially breaking the picture into two bits. One of which is the color, which is the low frequency bit. And in order to make something low frequency, we blur it. Now, a Gaussian blur is a mathematical function which removes the high frequency information from the image. So we want it to leave the form, but without too many of the wrinkles in her skin and other things like that. So I think this has got a radius of 7, and I think that's going to do for that. So, and then we're going to duplicate the master layer again, and we're going to create the texture layer. Now, the texture layer is a little bit more complicated, and we have to go Image, Apply Image. I'm going to apply it to the color layer, and I believe it's going to be Subtract. Now, what you can see here is just the high frequency information without any color. So this is great because in the old days, when we used to do retouching, it was all about the clone tool. Now the clone tool has essentially been superseded by the healing tool. So the other thing we have to do is we have to do linear light as our setting here. So now you can see the image of the low frequency plus the texture is the same as our original. We can see that just by turning them on and off. So I've got the master in case I ever need to go back, but for the moment that's pretty good, I think. So what is the point of all this? Well, the point of this is that as you can see, this is a very beautiful girl, but nobody has perfect skin. So we are going to just look at the texture layer, and we're going to use the skin healing tool to even out her skin tone, right? So this is going to, so I'm applying it to the color layer here, and just going to start to press Alt to create the little X spot, and we're going to go around and we're going to try to even out the little blobs of bad texture. Now this does take a little bit longer than cloning, because sometimes you have to do the texture layer as well. So you see, I had to do, in order to take out that spot, I had to go to the color layer and clone it out, and then also to the texture layer. But it's worth it, trust me. So now the other little trick that I think is really cool, like let me just give you an example. My other favorite filter apart from the Nik collection is the alien skin exposure. So I'm just going to load this up quickly as a quick demonstration of what happens when wrong layer. When we apply a high contrast black and white film effect to a picture. Now what happens is that if we go to black and white films, the result is, because sometimes you want a really nice contrasty image, but as you can see, what it's done is it's popped out all of the imperfections in her skin. Right, it's really made them stand out. So if we want to produce a nice black and white, that's what we're going to have to deal with. So we're going to cancel that. And in order to see those imperfections, I'm going to put an adjustment layer in. Now an adjustment layer doesn't actually change anything in the layers underneath it, but it does allow us to place a brightness and contrast layer over the top, and we can boost the contrast, and this makes it a lot easier to see the things we're trying to remove. So when I turn this on and off, you can see it bumps up the contrast and makes things much easier to spot. So I think we're going to start with the texture layer. I'm going to press square bracket down to make my selection smaller, and I'm going to take out the little high frequency imperfections in her skin. So these are just little bumps and blotches, and now I think it's important to leave in a few natural beauty spots, let's call them that, because nobody is absolutely perfect, and if you overdo any of this retouching, then what you get is a plastic effect. So, and nobody wants to look plastic, right? The art of retouching is to create an image that makes the person their perfect self. So imagine waking up in the morning when you'd had a great night's sleep, and you hadn't done anything, you're totally refreshed and not a single pimple. So that's the look we're trying to achieve. So as you can see, it's helping, but it's not doing everything. So let's go back to the color layer, and what we're trying to do here is remove the blotchiness that we find in the color layer, and this is what will give the perfect skin, but without that plastic effect. Now this is a little time consuming, but it's worth it for if you want a really good shot. Also useful if your makeup artist hasn't quite got their gradients on their makeup perfect. You can rework the toning and the cutting in of the cheekbone. Now, Nik Collection does have a skin smoother, but to be honest, it's really not as good at doing it by hand. So, if you're just doing a 5-minute portrait, then you can use the automatic one, but if you want the best, you've got to do it by hand. Now, everybody gets eye bags, so this is actually a great technique for dealing with people's eye bags. And we just want to cut around the shape of the eye, and we'll just take out that little line there, and there you go. So you can see it beginning to take effect. Let's have a look back up here. Now I might just increase the size of this now to make it a little quicker. So all I'm doing is hitting the Alt key to target the area of skin that I'm going to heal from, and then very roughly moving the textures around. Now, if we take off the texture layer, you can actually see the layer underneath, and we can begin to see what we're trying to do is make this smoother and remove all of the little blotchinesses that. Now this is a bit of a crease in her cheek, so we don't want to remove that. And this is again where, if we bump the contrast up, we can begin to see those imperfections pop out to us, and it makes it easier for us to figure out what we want to keep. And I'm editing the contrast layer. There we go. What we want to keep and what we don't want to keep. There we go. I get a lot of creases in people's necks. It's all very natural, but it's not very appealing. There is a quick way of doing this, which some people use, which is just to, let me show you quickly. So, for instance, if I just lasso an area of skin very roughly, I can apply another Gaussian blur to it. And that will just do a kind of area soften. Again, it depends what you're shooting. If you're producing an editorial piece that you really want to wow the world with, it's worth spending the time. But if you're just, somebody says, I want 20 of my shots retouched, perhaps you don't have the time to do them all by hand. So just blurring the whole area is a quick and easy fix to the whole thing. Okay, so actually, let's try it on the shoulder just here. So there's just a bit of, and if you press Control F, that will use the last filter that you had in place. Control D to deselect. Okay, now armpits. Quite frankly, armpits are never attractive. Okay, so the color layer is looking pretty good at the moment. We might have to come back to her hands later. Hands are also tricky sometimes. But, on the whole, things are looking pretty smooth. Okay, so, wow. Now the texture layers come back, and we can begin to think about, okay, what's not so attractive in the texture layer. Now, I think we're going to take out some of these teeny weeny lines here. It's always good to work into an area from the edges. So you begin to smooth out, create smooth patches, and then you can continue to move inwards and work them out. So again, I'm using the healing tool instead of the clone tool, and it does a pretty good job. I don't really have to use the clone tool anymore. I used to use it all the time. Okay, so let's take away that little piece there. Okay, and again, the square brackets, you can change the size of your brush, which means you don't have to move the mouse back and forth. That one I have to go back to the color layer. So we flip back and forth between texture and color, trying to preserve as much. I mean, skin has a natural texture to it, and you can see there's a little bit of film grain going on here when the contrast is turned up. So if you have something with a texture in it, and then all of a sudden parts of it become untextured, the eye will see that, and that's why cloning is bad. Right, how are we doing? Okay. Something going on here with her lip. If you make a mistake, Control Z is undo. The other thing I find with Photoshop is to increase the length of your history. It's an invaluable thing to do. Right, so while we're on the history tab, what we're going to do, turn the contrast off again so we get a more realistic picture of what's going on, and create a snapshot. Now snapshots are very useful because you can see the difference between before and after, and it really becomes quite apparent the difference between, you know, now she just looks beautiful here, and you don't notice that she's been all smoothed out. She just looks like a fresh-faced girl, which is what we want. So we'll keep the snapshots, come back to them, keep on adding snapshots, so we can see what we need to, how we've done, you know, the progress of the work. So we're going to come back to the texture layer, and this time we're going to take away this arm, which I seem to have forgotten about. So I've just started up my Facebook page, so please come to Nik Color Photography and give us a like. I'll be posting more of these retouches in the future, trying to impart all the things that I learn to you guys. Right, so there you go. With the texture back on, you'll still have to remove these little skin defects. Okay, so those no longer jump out at us. Now freckles, I don't mind freckles. It just makes things look natural. So here you go, the contrast turned up again. Is there anything that we really need to work on? Let's have a look at this hand. just going to do a little smoothing of the wrinkles here. Actually, I think I'm going to try that. So I'm just pressing Control F to run the Gaussian Blur filter, and then we're going to do the same on the texture layer. Maybe not. Back to the history. We'll delete the okay, so let's take the so this area of the arm is doesn't have too much shape to it, so I can just do the lasso technique, which should speed things up a bit. Okay. Right. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So now for my next trick, we're going to convert this to a smart object. Now the beauty of this is that we can go back into the smart object and continue to edit areas of skin if we want to, and we can copy it. So I'm going to duplicate this layer, as I want to create one color version and one black and white version. So both, let's rename this now. So this is going to be black and white, and this one is going to be color. Both of them share the information. So if I now right click here and do edit smart object, edit contents, you'll see that it has got the two layers that I put into the smart object, and that will apply to both the black and white and the color. So essentially I've now got one master. Okay, so let's go back to the Nik filters, and we're going to take a look at Color Efex Pro. So Color Efex 4 has identified that it's a smart object and will now apply a smart filter. Now what that means is that if I make a change, so let's for instance let's go to the tonal contrast here, right? So let's just turn it on. Okay, it's a bit much. So it's nice to boost the shadows a little bit without having too much effect. So we want to make her eyes pop essentially, and right. So here's the before and after. Maybe less saturation. I don't want it to be too saturated. Okay, so before and after. So let's just I'm going to show you this and keep an eye on these settings here. And yes, takes a while. Not me, software by Google. Okay, so now this smart filter is applied to this layer here, and I can load it back up. And it's remembered my settings, so I can carry on editing. Let's see what else we can do. Now, as you can see, there's a whole bunch of other filters that you should just have a play with. Darken, light, and center is quite popular. So that really begins to make her pop, huh? Bring her around a little bit. It's looking good. And I haven't tried this one before, but there's a foliage filter. Ooh, not sure about that. So here's the dynamic skin softener, but as you can see, that's not bad actually. Let's try it. Dark contrast. Ooh, that's not nice. So you've got all sorts of film effects in here as well. Cross-processing is quite nice. Yeah, I quite like that. So what I think we're going to do is we're going to try adding a control point. Now this is the real strength of Nik, is that I can apply this just to a certain area rather than the whole thing. And it's given her a bit more a golden hue, and the control points allow us to target specific areas, which is essentially the advantage over this package of tools rather than the alien skin tools that I was using before. It's targetable, so we can place these control points down, and so the background essentially has not been affected while our targeted areas have. So we've given her a little bit more goldenness to those areas. Oh, and one more we're going to add is the detail extractor. So, and we definitely only want to apply this to certain areas, specifically her eyes. So what we really want is to make those eyes stand out. And I'm also going to pop one on the jewellery here, and we'll have a look at that in a minute. So the one thing I don't like about Nik is the way that the zoom levels are controlled. I have very little control over the zoom level. Right. So that's the size of the area we're going to look at, which is essentially her just her eyes, and we want to sharpen it so it kind of makes everything more dramatic. And the one more thing that I want to do here is I want to add more greenness to her eyes. Let's try. Now, the other thing I'm not so sure about the Nik tools is that they don't save what you're doing, and if you click on add new, well, I wanted to click add filter before I did the color extractor, and I'd forgotten to erased everything I'd done. Okay, so yeah, we'll try the saturation on this, see what happens. So I'd have to I'm not sure I can do it on one. Okay, so let's just do that for the moment, and we're going to add filter, and color stylizer. It may not be the tool that we need. No, okay. We're going to have to take extreme measures. Okay, so I think that we're getting there with this anyway. So if I press P, I can see the before and after effects that I've applied. Okay, now we're just going to OK that because we can come back to it later, which is the beauty of smart objects. Now, it does make things more time consuming. Every time you go in and edit, it has to do this, but that's the price we pay. Okay, so now we can see there's the black and white that we haven't done anything to before and then after. So you can see her eyes pop out. Now, and we're going to enter the smart object, and I'm going to show you another technique. Okay, so we're going to have to try some contouring. So we're going to create a layer with 50% grey on it, and then we're going to create an overlay on that. Now that does absolutely nothing. What an overlay does is that anything that's mid-grey is ignored, and anything that's white is brightened, and everything that's dark is darkened. Everything that's black is darkened. So by using the black and white tools here, we're going to paint with a very small brush of just 10 or 11%, and we're going to try to contour the edges of her face and cheekbones and things like that. So just start a little bit here. And what we're trying to do is enhance the lines of her face and body. So this, we want to make more of the backlighting essentially, and brighten some of the areas around here. Let's make more of this little cheekbone, beautiful cheekbone going on here. And it's supposed to be quite subtle, I think. So if we press X, we can swap from white to black. And here's where we're going to cut in her cheekbones a bit more, essentially do the makeup artist job for them, and maybe darken this a little bit. So we can add drama to the shot by doing the contouring ourselves. So if I put this into normal mode, you can begin to see what I've done. So that's quite useful. Back to overlay, and it's just supposed to be subtle, but just adds a bit more pop to her contours. And then perhaps you think it's too much, so we can just tone it down a bit. very good for men contouring. You can cut in muscles. If you remember that shot of David Beckham wearing Dolce & Gabbana, used to be on the buses in London, he was very cut in post-production, gave him an amazing six-pack. Unfortunately, David, we know it wasn't true. This triangle here is called the Rembrandt triangle. Okay, so there you go. That's a little contouring. So for good practice, we'll rename this the contour layer. And now, eyes. Eyes. I'm going to cut out her eyes with a little feather and create their own layer from the master. Oh, actually, that's not the master. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate these layers, and then I'm going to merge them. So now I have a single layer with everything in it. Yeah, so I can actually take out her eyes here. So the eyes are the windows to the soul, so they are perhaps the most important part of the image. Now the one thing that I haven't found a way to do yet is dodge the eyes with frequency separation. So just going to go back to taking the eyes I've just cut out and dodging the shadows. Oh, look at how her eyelashes just spring to life. And again, we're maximizing the makeup artist's results, and we're going to come in here and just do the edges of the eyes. And we want to make them a bit greener, so we're just going to use the saturate tool to bring out the colour of her eyes. Don't they just pop out? Okay. So let's do a quick snapshot. Oh, actually, wrong place to do the snapshot. So save the smart object. This will then apply to both my black and white and my colour layer, and it then has to reapply the filters that we prepared earlier. So now we can go to history and add another snapshot, and we've got the original, the skin tones, and then the contouring of the eyes. Okay. So now for the fun part, we're going to go into black and white. Silver Efex Pro. I've become a great fan of this one. Again, it's a smart filter, which is good. Now, seems to have remembered some of my settings from a previous edit. Usually great, but not in this case. Okay, so what we're looking for is something which has got a good range of whites, midtones and greys. That's the neutral effect. High structure, that's nice. So we're going to just flick through the initial setup and push 1.5, that's pretty beautiful. And look for something that appeals to us. Full dynamics. Now you can see the difference between the blown out background and the so that's very soft and flat. So we want her skin to be fine art. The skin to be nice and soft, but we're going to want some contrast in different areas. So I think this fine art, we're going to remove the frame. Maybe that's too much. I still think this is my favourite one so far. So this gives our base base edit, right? And let's start with this one. So then we've got all these controls here that we can start to adjust the midtones, increase the shadows. So we want to, especially the eyes and the hair, we want to achieve a nicer degree of contrast. And I don't want any film effects right now. I just want the black and white. And we can begin to add control points, just like the colour one. So this bit of her hair has lost a lot of its detail, so we're going to boost the contrast and the structure. Oh, look at that, that's amazing. So we can begin to add specific control points to refine the image to achieve the details that we're looking for. So just go around and bring out the details. Now there was an area here which I think the brightening is, it's got too bright. As much as backlighting is nice, sometimes. There you go. And then on the other side, maybe these shadows are too distracting, so we're going to brighten it up and maybe flatten it. And I can copy that control point and place it again, so that I get an evenness to the picture. Now for black and whites, I sometimes like to add some vignette. So we can try different, oh no, it's toning, different vignette modes, and vignette brings the eye to the middle of the picture. That's quite dark, so there you go, let's brighten it up a bit. So because I've already done a lot of work on her eyes, I don't really think I need to do more. If anything, I might actually brighten them. copy that across to the other one, so we get a nice even look. And oh, well, you can see the difference there between. It's a piercing shot. And looking at this little earring here, maybe we'll just bring that out a little bit. Since this is actually a jewellery shot, and we can do the same maybe to this piece here. And let's say OK to that. Okay, so here we have our black and white, our colour edit, and our original shot. Please subscribe to my channel, I'll be doing more of these, and I hope you enjoyed the show.